Experiment 3, Agentic or Deterministic. Experiment 2 with Chrome DevTools went off the rails at the end. When we were looking at automating tests with Chrome DevTools, the final prompt I gave it was to create a Claude Code / command. And as it went through this process, it suddenly started getting into things like creating / commands for converting tests to YAML, creating actions, creating a readmes, / commands quick start. Totally unexpected, way beyond what I'd asked for, and all of a sudden we're looking at key features about UID resolution, semantic element screen. It just didn't pan out the way I expected it to. Why was that? Well, when I was dry running experiment 2, I had been thinking about this concept of agentic versus deterministic. The whole Chrome DevTools MCP approach, where we take a test case and then just use the LLM with Claude Code and get the Chrome DevTools MCP to automate the test, feels very agentic and almost unreliable. Would I bet my life on this running and doing exactly the same thing every time? No, and that's not what I want out of a test case. So I was exploring this concept of going from test case to dry run with DevTools and then creating a more deterministic approach with something like a Playwright script that you could bet your life on would run consistently 100% of the time. Deterministic, as in a system in which no randomness is involved in the future runs that we might be making. And I was hoping that that approach would be more reliable in the long term. And a combination of the two would be the ideal way to write tests quickly and provide a deterministic, reliable test. So what actually happened when we were running experiment 2 was that I'd forgotten that I had just moved a file that I'd been developing and writing with the help of Claude Code about deterministic test automation. So actually in my project, I had moved into a temp file and folder this markdown file about deterministic test automation. And this came from the previous run where I got carried away a little bit and I was exploring this idea of moving from agentic to deterministic. And when I started this run with experiment 2, and I'd said read all of the files in this project, it had read this file that I'd previously developed with Claude Code. Totally forgotten that that was in there. Claude had obviously read it. I'd forgotten about it. And by the end of the experiment 2, Claude Code had gone off and was starting to look at the concept of this and had started creating these commands that I wasn't expecting to do with converting tests to YAML. So it was kind of looking towards a scripted approach using YAML for the test cases for subsequent runs. So whilst Claude was going off and doing something that I wasn't expecting, actually the results are really interesting because this prompting part of experiment 2 was actually guided with context about deterministic testing. And the consequence of this was that Claude Code had gone off and created a test automation framework that moved from an agentic initial test run to a more deterministic test execution approach with a YAML format defining the test execution for subsequent consistent runs. So what we ended up with was a command to do the run tests, followed by a command to convert the test to YAML, followed by a create action command that builds an actions library that's a reusable set of test actions that can be implemented for subsequent test runs. And that is absolutely fascinating because it's not what I was expecting. It was not the aim of the experiment, but we've got something for experiment 3 that we can explore and expand on. So Claude has left us with a guide then on / commands quick start that it's come up with, and we can follow through on those 3 steps to try our deterministic test automation approach. I'm going to clear the context first, and then I'm going to run that first command, run -test, and that expects the test case as the parameter. So we'll copy the relative path from that, paste that in there, and Claude Code's off executing that markdown test from our test case repository, and it's navigating to the accounts dashboard, creating the new account, and we can see the main investment, my investment account, added in the dashboard. And if we go back to Claude Code, it needs authorization to complete final steps, which includes hovering over the main investment. So you can see that highlighted now, and it's completed 1 to 13 steps, taking the final screenshot and generating a test report. And it looks to me like it's created an images folder with the snapshots of the final completed test case, and it's saying that what it's done is time round using its new run test command. It's created a test execution report, and it's completed a test execution report with a summary, execution details, the steps it's been through, verification results, evidence captured, observations, issues, notes, and the test status passed, test is valued, and execution is repeatable. So from here it's suggesting that we then run the follow-up command, and I'm guessing that it's all got its context ready to go with this convert-test-to-yaml, and we just check that. So convert-test-to-yaml, pass in the test case again from test cases, test management folder, and we'll run this second step. And this, it says, will create a structured YAML specification, identify the user actions, document the parameters and assertions, and provide ready to save output. Let's see what we get from that. What it looks like we're getting is a test case defined in a YAML structure, and we've got a test specs folder now, and that has created a YAML file, successfully converted test case to YAML specification, and it's creating a summary document. So what have we got? Crikey, that's quite big. So metadata, functional accounts, investments, create, timestamp. Well, this is the data that we entered to create the account with, preconditions, verified text. Wow, so these look like the commands that are available from the DevTools MCP server. And the steps navigate. Come to this next bit. Let's just quick flick through this. Navigate, click button, verify account types. Step 4, select investment. Account name. Wow, so I'm guessing we can pass in parameters now and change the data that we use to drive this test. Submit form, verify the accounts created, hover over the account, select account name, shows the hover highlight effect. Wow. Assertions assert, and these are the assertions it's running as it goes through it. Wow. And the evidence that it's coming up with when it completes the test. So some screenshots, verify it's accounted, and some notes, custom actions. All right, what's the next file that it's then created? So it's also created a test case 1 conversion notes. Let's create that, have a look at this file. Conversion notes, test management, add investment account, YAML specification, metadata section, variable section, preconditions, steps that it's gone through, the assertions, evidence collected. What has it graded here? Selector strategy used. This needs a bit more analysis, but what I'm interested to know now is, now that we have a YAML version of the test, what does Claude Code think we should do next? Next steps: review the YAML spec, implement custom actions, create the add account action library, build a YAML test runner. We haven't done that yet. That's new. And test execution to check that it worked. Convert more test cases. Whoa. And none of this was planned. It's just created it from a markdown document that I was experimenting with. So experiment 3 then is all about working out what on earth has Claude built. In terms of results then, it does look like I have a deterministic test automation framework now. Certainly wasn't something I was expecting, and there's still a lot of working out to be completed here to see if this is viable. I think from that, the main lesson I've learned is that we might have a run twice pattern, which gives us the ability to take what we thought was an agentic process and convert it in a deterministic process, as long as we have some context about the goal we're aiming for. And that context came from a document I was just working with Claude on and experimenting and coming up with ideas and trying to explain why I thought I needed to get away from an agentic test process with test cases that were unreliable, more towards creating deterministic test cases that could be run consistently and reliably. Final thoughts then. It's really interesting. I've no idea where this is going to go. Watch this space.